Two dicks, wow.
Yeah! Here we go! Here we go! Here we go!
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the 1IQ Football Talk podcast.
And having to go, yeah, but he did kind of do this.
What I'm hearing is you just want Tom Brady dead. Like that's all I'm hearing at this point. You just want Brady
Well,
dead.
not anymore. He's retired now, so I'm good with that. I don't want him calling games anymore because holy hell, he's hard to listen to.
Enough angry and, depressing from myself. Sterling, thank you for being able to sit there as my therapist for this episode.
Start the game already!
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the 1IQ Football Talk podcast, and we are now officially into the free agency period of where people have started to sign their contracts. It has been a very, very big week of just pure free agent moves. Not as crazy as the news that happened all of last week. Obviously, there's still some stuff what we can talk about there, but first off, Sterling, how you doing today, my friend?
Doing all right. We live in Winterland again. It started snowing, so we had that nice weather for a couple weeks, and it's gross, but it's been a crazy week for NFL news through free agency. It wasn't a wild free agency because there weren't a lot of big names available or anything. Honestly, a lot of the trades we saw last week were bigger than some of the signings we saw this week, but there's still been some interesting moves that teams have made, some intriguing decisions by other teams to not make moves, and there's still a few players out there that have yet to be signed anywhere. So it's going to be a fun couple of weeks here still.
Yeah, obviously, free agency opened on Monday. That was the legal tampering window. I just consider that free agency because, technically you haven't put name to paper yet, but the odds of a guy saying I'm going to sign with this team and then backing out with it from the next 2 days is not really, it almost never happens. I've only seen it maybe once or twice over my time covering the NFL. And
yeah, I always hope for it to happen because I think it's just entertaining when it does. At least once a year, it'd be fun to see it happen. Someone just, I'll sign with you, and then just jump ship to a rival on actual signing day.
And most of the time, it's one of those things where it's like the player says like, "Oh, I'm going to sign for this team," and then they go, "Actually, I'm just going to re-sign with the team that I'm currently on," and those are the things that we see, and it's like, oh, but. Yeah, so it was kind of interesting and crazy, but ever since then, like what you said, this was not necessarily a great free agent class. You didn't really have any superstars out there for teams to ultimately pick up, and again, this is kind of one of those weird years of where you don't have a great free agent class, and you don't really have that great of a draft class either, so teams bringing in players I view the draft class as a starting draft class where you're going to get a bunch of starters. And this was kind of the same thing with this free agent class of where you're going to get impactful players and you're going to get starters, but you're probably not going to get elite superstar guys. You're not getting the Saquon Barkleys or the Derrick Henrys of the world where they can come over and be an absolute game changer. You're looking at this, you're going who got the biggest deal? Milton Williams, the D tackle that played for the Eagles. He goes over the Patriots, a total value of $104 million for a guy that was a rotational defensive tackle for the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, he was a really good, impactful defensive tackle for the Eagles.
And really only rotational because the depth on that Eagles line is so good.
Yeah, and so I was always a little bit concerned with Milton Williams coming from the Eagles, potentially, if I thought the Chicago Bears were going to sign him, because I know defensive tackle was an area that they were going to try to address this offseason. And the reason I was a little bit concerned was because of that rotation. And where you see guys like Jalen Carter and you have all of the edge rushers that they have and just all the talent on that defensive line, and you go, well, you can't necessarily just look at Milton Williams and go, oh, he's a game changer because look at all these numbers that he's getting. Well, he's also playing right beside Jalen Carter. That's a really insane dude to play beside. And then if Jalen Carter takes a playoff, they have the other Georgia defensive tackle that they drafted 2 years prior to in the first round. And if you're not worried about a defensive tackle, well, then you have Josh Sweat, also left in free agency. He ends up signing with the Cardinals. And then you also had just insert name here, insert name here. And the Eagles' defensive line was just that crazy. So it was one of those things of going, is he the guy because of he is just simply the guy, or was it because he had a lot of talent around him allowing him to succeed?
Right. Yeah. The system he was in, plus the coach he had, it it remains to be seen. Obviously, the Patriots saw something that they liked, and I mean that defense in New England was pretty abysmal anyway. So anything is really an improvement. So I don't fault them that. I think that was a good signing for them. Go out and get a big D tackle that you can start building that defense around, even if he's not going to be an elite, top 10 D tackle. He's still probably going to be a top 25 D tackle.
Oh, yeah. And one thing we know about Mike Vrabel is the dude loves to have defensive or athletic defensive linemen. And this is a guy who, Milton Williams, I believe, is only 26 years old. So, like, there's still going to be a lot of growth with him. Again, 4-year deal that brings him to, I think, 30 years old, as I just quickly take a look at his age. But yeah, like, again, we knew Vrabel wanted to bring in some defensive lineman, is 26 years old, so the 4-year deal brings him to at least 30. So this is pretty much the prime years of Milton Williams' career, and yeah, it's going to be really interesting. Obviously, that's the biggest deal in terms of just money value, but I would say probably the most important deal out of any team that has made a deal is the one who got Sam Darnold, because we went into this offseason and it was who is going to win the Sam Darnold sweepstake. He was going to be the first domino that needed to fall, because teams like the Jets, the Giants, the Steelers, the Browns, the Titans, and at that point the Seahawks, after they made the trade for Geno Smith, I know we talked about that a little bit last weekend, kind of what the Seahawks are doing with their whole situation, and we'll kind of touch a little bit more on the Seahawks a little bit later, but they ultimately won the sweepstakes for Sam Darnold, and I think both of us can sit back and agree that was probably a good move for Seattle, but it's still one of those things where you look at it and go, are you really sure about Sam Darnold?
Right, good move for Seattle. Maybe not the best move for Sam Darnold. We've talked about it the last couple of weeks with Darnold, that his landing spot really should be somewhere with more of an offensive-minded head coach, with a play caller that's already in place and is confident in what they're doing, as opposed to going to a team like Seattle or Pittsburgh that is very defense-oriented and doesn't have somebody there that can help harness Sam Darnold's talents like Kevin O'Connell was able to do. And so I definitely expect to see a bit of a regression this year from Sam Darnold. Also the weapons, you don't have Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, those type of guys to throw to anymore. It's, when he signed there, it was Jackson Smith and Jigba and Noah Fant were sort of his options at that time.
Yep. And again, we talked about this last week. Like when we saw the Geno Smith trade, and it was basically everyone and their mother saying, okay, well, Seattle is clearly the landing spot for Sam Darnold. And we both kind of just sat there and went, okay. Like, again, we have a good buddy in Will, who also does the baseball podcast with DJ on our channel as well. He's a Seahawks fan, not DJ, but Will. And when they signed Sam Darnold, he texted me and goes, rate the move. I went, well, for Seattle, it's a good move because they simply need a quarterback. But for Sam Darnold, it's probably a bad move because he went from a team, like what you said, with Justin Jefferson, who, if you don't consider him the number one receiver in the NFL, you probably have him at number 2 behind his buddy Jamar Chase. Like, I don't think that's a stretch to say that those two are the very best receivers in the NFL, and it's really just your personal preference of who you think is better. He's leaving that while also having Justin Jefferson, who is one of the best number 2 receivers in the NFL. TJ Hawkinson, who has not necessarily been one of the best tight ends in the NFL the last couple of years, but is still without a doubt top 10. You had Aaron Jones, who is a very talented running back, a little bit older, but still very talented. An offensive line that could protect him with Kevin O'Connell, who is a clear one of the best play callers in the NFL. Granted, he just won head coach of the year for what he was capable of doing. Now you're going over to Seattle with Jackson Smith and Jigba, Noah Fant, clear downgrades on all three of the receiving weapons. The running backs, I would say, with Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, you could probably combine those two guys to be above what the production you'd get from Aaron Jones. Like, I feel like that's good for Seattle, but you also touched on it where the offensive line is pretty weak. And then Clint Kubiak, who does technically come from that McVay, from that Kevin O'Connell type system, but the 1 year that he's been a play caller was last year with the Saints, and they had ups and downs.
Right. And even if he does figure it out this year and he does really well, I wouldn't be surprised to see him land a head coaching job next year as a result if they do well enough in Seattle. You know, this was a bit of a head scratcher. Like, yes, it's a good deal for Seattle. They got a good play caller. I think it was a 4-year deal. They didn't overpay for him. He's making, what was it,
3-year deal.
Something like that.
He's making $33 million for a 3-year contract. So a really affordable deal where you're not overpaying for a quarterback.
But at the same time, I look at it and I go, yous aren't really ready to win now. If anything, you got worse throughout the offseason so far. And this is a move where you go, you might have been better off just bringing in another free agent, rolling with Sam Howell since you traded for him last year, having a terrible season, and getting a really good draft pick next year, which has a much better quarterback class where you could potentially get the quarterback of your future. You know, instead of with Sam Darnold, now this team's flirting with they're probably going to hover around the 500 mark. You know, depending on how the rest of their division does, will determine whether they are fighting for a playoff spot or not. And then you're looking at picking so far back in the draft that you may not get a good enough pick to get one of the great quarterbacks that's coming up.
Yeah, the way that I described the Seattle Seahawks team is when they traded away DK Metcalf, when they traded away Geno Smith, I think they sent a clear message to everyone where they said, you know what, guys, we're trying to rebuild this team, we're trying to reset, and we're just trying to get things right moving forward into the future. And you know, we understand that's probably not going to be as sexy as it was. And then they go out there and sign Sam Darnold, which again, that's a we're trying to win type move. Then signing DeMarcus Lawrence, the defensive end, that's a win type move. Again, they signed Cooper Kupp yesterday. That's a move where you say like, oh, like this is a guy at his current age where you would say he's a perfect number 3 receiver on a team with 2 established guys. This is a win type move. So you have this team where you're looking at them and going, okay, the first couple of moves you made this offseason, you're like, okay, you're putting yourself in a direction and it makes sense. Like, good for you. Like, good job at putting yourself in a direction. And then a day later, you're like, what are you doing? You're now completely flip-flopping, and you're basically going, yeah, we're trying to compete for a Super Bowl this year. And it's like, what?
Like in the span of a week, they went from, we're going to rebuild to, oh, hey, we're going to try to compete. And it's just, that's the Seattle Seahawks all over, though, man.
Yeah.
Like, that's the kind of shit that they do. It's so bizarre. And, you know, I've seen a lot of Seahawks fans that are starting to get tired of it because they also have absolutely no loyalty to any of their team. You know, any players they have. The number of Seahawks fans I've seen going through their jerseys, and it's like, we traded him, we traded him, we traded him. And a lot of these were great players, you know. We let him walk in free agency. And it's like the number of talented guys they've had there that they just opted to walk away from instead of committing to just screams inadequacy for this Seattle Seahawks team.
Yeah, and again, like it was one of those things where I don't think any of us really sat down and thought about Seattle with their loyalty with their players until like Richard Sherman kind of talked about it. It was like they have no loyalty to their players. Like they just send guys away. Like Bobby Wagner went away, then came back and thought he was going to finish his career when he was still very clearly capable of playing. They're like, nah, we don't really want you. And
Yep.
you again, DK he requested a trade.
Yep.
And like I'm not going to fault Seattle on the DK situation because this is not the first time in his Seattle career that he has requested a trade.
No,
Sure, I
no,
get
but
it.
I mean, Russell Wilson
Hmm.
is another one, and that was a bad trade too.
Well, for them, it was a great trade.
I mean, they didn't, nothing came of it for them, so I don't know if it was. At first it looked like a great trade, but it fizzled out so badly that I think that trade's been downgraded from a great trade to an okay trade.
Fair enough. I'll concede to you on that one. But yeah, it's shocking to see this Seattle Seahawks team. And again, I think everyone, if you've been listening before, you know that I hate teams that just play in the middle, that are just sticking to like, yep, good enough
Hmm.
is good enough. And I've seen it too long with my Chicago Bears. I've seen it for too long with your Pittsburgh Steelers. I've seen it with a handful of other teams, and it just annoys me when there's teams out there that just go, yep, good enough is good enough. It should be you're competing for a Super Bowl or you're a rebuilding team. I know it's not
Yep.
necessarily that black and white, and there's levels to certain things, but at the end of the day, if you're not competing for a Super Bowl, what are you doing? And
Yeah.
you can sit back and say, well, we're in a rebuilding phase, and it goes, okay, if you're being honest about that and saying we are attempting to rebuild, perfect. There's going to be no fault on you when you're a bad team. We're just going to sit back and go, yep, nope, like you've already come out and said you are
Yeah.
in a rebuild. Perfect.
But stick with that narrative if that's what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Don't start rebuilding and then go, oh, but we're going to bring in a quarterback and a defensive player and a wide receiver that is going to add an extra 5 or 6 wins to our record. Because it's like, okay, but now you're basically stunting your rebuild at that point because
Hmm.
now you're going to be picking 18th instead of 8th.
Yeah. Now, I will say the moves that the Seattle Seahawks have made, they do have 5 draft picks in the first 3 rounds.
Hmm.
That is
Yep.
something that is really, really useful. And if Seattle can go about those 5 draft picks and get 5 starters, impactful players, they're going to be putting themselves in a really good position. But the question is, you need to get your offensive line sorted. You need probably 2 guards and maybe a tackle and maybe even a center. So you're basically going to have to try to rehaul your entire offensive line, which, I mean, if you want to spend 3 picks on your offensive line, that's something that you can definitely do. There are
Yep.
players in this draft class where you can get starters in round 3,
Hmm.
but you also need another number one, or you need another receiver to go out there to replace DK Metcalf. Like I look at Cooper Cup and say that is a replacement for Tyler Lockett. Like
Yeah.
without
100%.
a doubt, a slot
Yeah.
receiver that just does amazing stuff out of the slot and is a little bit older. But you need
And
someone to go replace DK.
You do. And I mean, not necessarily replace DK, but just complement JSN because I
Yeah.
look at Smith and Jigba, and he is talented enough. He could be a wide receiver one. There is potential there that he could be the top guy, which means you just need to find somebody to play that wide out too. But either way, you need to find somebody that's either going to, complement JSN or be better than him somehow. And so that is a tough order when you still have to get that many offensive line pieces because you're not going to get that talent of a wide receiver if you wait until the 4th, 5th, 6th rounds. You're going to have to spend that first round pick or an early second rounder to get that wide receiver, really. And that's ultimately where you want to be spending those picks on linemen instead. And so they're in that tough spot where, yeah, if they hit it perfectly, they could just turn this rebuild around in the span of 2 years and it could be an impressive move. But it's really hard to do that.
Yeah.
Usually you're going to miss a couple of picks. It's not going to quite land where you want it. Guys aren't going to mesh with your system. It usually takes 2 to 3 years. So I don't know. They have the potential, but it's going to be really hard. They're going to have to be perfect at the draft.
And as we all know, I'm someone that says you need to have as many draft picks as possible because every draft pick is a lottery ticket.
Yep.
It's something you just don't know. And if you have 10 draft picks in a season and you have 5 that hit, that's a pretty good draft class. Like
Yep.
you're sitting back pretty happy with that. And there are times when you can get maybe a little bit more than that. There are teams that have definitely been able to do that. We often see maybe a team only hit on 1 draft pick in an entire 7 pick draft class. And so the Seattle team, they're desperately going to need to hit on these draft picks for them to feel really good about this offseason.
Yeah.
But yeah, they've just been one of those teams this offseason that have had a really strange approach. There's 2 more teams that I kind of want to talk about, and the next being is the Houston Texans.
Mm-hmm.
They have had an offseason where you just kind of sit back and go, what's the plan? Because you had a quarterback in CJ Stroud who I think we might have all anointed a little bit quickly. And now it's not necessarily all his fault that he had a little bit of a down year in year number 2. His offensive line was terrible. He was the second most sacked quarterback in the NFL. All 3 of his top weapons were injured at one point in the season. And, 2 of them were out for a good portion of the year.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes things really, really tricky. But to trade away Laramie Tunsil and then to also trade away another guard, you just go, Laramie Tunsil is probably a top 5 left tackle in the NFL.
Yeah.
I understand that you got a second, a third, and a couple of additional picks to get Laramie Tunsil. But when you have the second most sacked quarterback in the NFL, sending away your top offensive lineman doesn't tell me you're trying to fix the problem. Now, the other offensive lineman that they traded away, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he was a former first-round pick for them that just has never panned out. Like, I can understand you saying, you know what, we're sending you away because you need a fresh start, we need to move on. Like, I get that. Like, that's fine. Like, you weren't going to realistically get... You're not downgrading by losing out on this guy, but by trading away Laramie Tunsil, you had a team where you needed to get interior offensive linemen. Now you need interior offensive line plus a tackle. Like they're doing the reverse Chicago Bears, of where the Bears looked at this and said, we need interior offensive linemen, and we might need another left tackle. We're not exactly sure with Braxton Jones yet, but we're going to get 2 guards and a center over this offseason, and we're going to completely overhaul that because our quarterback was the most sacked quarterback in the NFL and had the 3rd most sacks taken by a quarterback in NFL history over a single season. And it seems like the Texans were almost insulted by that they came in second. They said, we can do better. We're going to break that record for CJ Stroud next year.
Right, and I think that's something we forget about this Texans organization is they had a really good draft when they got CJ Stroud,
Will
and
Anderson.
they had a phenomenal year all of a sudden, and people were like, oh, this team and this quarterback is something special. But then we got to remember, this is the Houston Texans. This organization makes some bad moves very often. That's the reason they are so often considered a bad team. You can get a great player and have a good year and then just start to backslide. I mean, you got to remember, this is a team that traded away DeAndre Hopkins in his prime, and that squandered JJ Watt's career. It's just incredible to me that they're now looking at CJ Stroud and going, you're just going to be our next victim. That's what it feels like, really. Because
Yeah.
trading away Laramie Tunsil and not getting a first rounder back for him, it's a head scratcher to me because you're not going to be able to replace him with that second and third rounder. And I do believe that it was next year that pick comes down. Or did they get a first?
No, they didn't get a first. Like
No.
I'll look up the exact
Yeah.
trade details here, but I know there was a second round pick.
I believe the second round was next year and the third was this year,
Yes.
is what it was. But it's just for a team that had such a bad offensive line already, and Larry Tunsil was sort of the only bright spot on that line. You've sort of told CJ Stroud that it's up to him.
Yeah.
You know, you went out and you added weapons for him to get the ball to, but he's now going to have less time to get that ball out.
So the Commanders are acquiring five-time Pro Bowl left tackle Laramie Tunsil from the Houston Texans in exchange for a package of draft picks 2025 third and seventh, plus a 2026 second and fourth round selection. Washington will receive a 2025 fourth round pick in addition to Laramie Tunsil. So essentially, the Texans and the Commanders are swapping a third and a fourth, and then they're giving a seventh this year, and then the Commanders are giving up a second next year and a fourth next year. Which, again, he's a five-time Pro Bowler at left tackle.
Right?
Like, what are we doing, and what are we talking about? Again, I think both of us will sit back and say, when the Texans traded away Deshaun Watson, that was probably the smartest thing for them. Like,
Yep.
they didn't have to go down that road of just an insane salary cap, an insane person to probably deal with, and they got a shit ton of picks. They got the pick that ultimately guaranteed them Will Anderson. Like that's
Yep.
a pretty good move. And we could go back through the entire trade history on that one, but yeah, this is, I just don't know. And we look at the Texans this year. We know Nico Collins is back. We know Tank Dell is back. Stephon Diggs, are they going to bring him back? But
Right.
can you trust Tank Dell to be healthy? And sure, some of the wide receivers that they brought in Braxton Berrios on a 1-year deal. Ooh, that
Yep.
really moves the needle.
Well, and I do believe they made the trade for Christian Kirk as well.
They did, yep.
Yeah, and so that to me says that Diggs is likely on his way out.
Yes.
We all really didn't expect to see Stephon Diggs playing there more than the one season. And then after that injury, that really solidified it for me. But who knows? Maybe because of that injury, now nobody else wants to take him on, and they might just be stuck with him for that final year.
Yeah, and the Jags traded Christian Kirk to the Texans for a 2026 seventh round pick. So, a very solid deal for the Texans. But
Yep.
that entire, like this entire offseason for the Texans, the players that they have ultimately either re-signed or brought in: Mario Edwards, defensive end; Tremon Smith, corner; Nick Neerman, interior linebacker; Sheldon Rankins, D tackle; Lankin Tomlinson, guard; Derek Barnett, defensive end; MJ Stewart, safety; Braxton Berrios, wide receiver; and Casey Tohill, defensive end; and Justin Watson as a wide receiver. Those are the free agents that they have ultimately signed. And, granted, they didn't really lose anyone terribly great in terms of the free agency. Eric Murray, a safety; John Weeks, Chris Boyd, and Delshawn Phillips, and Kendrick Green. Again, you're not sitting back going like, oh, these are massive, massive losses. But it's one of those things you're looking at this team going, this is the year where you were supposed to take that step and go, we are putting our stamp on being a Super Bowl contender. And they're just going, we're going backwards, and we're going backwards quickly.
Right, like they're going backwards to the point where we can't even be sure that they're going to be the best team in the AFC South next year.
Yeah.
This really just screams to me that they're looking to completely overhaul their offensive line through the draft. The problem is there are about a dozen teams in the league that are also looking to overhaul their offensive lines. And so you're not all going to get the best players.
Yep.
And you're going to be fighting with these other teams that, because of where the Texans finished, they're likely picking after most of these other teams that are looking for offensive linemen. And so that's going to cause a big problem for them.
So, as we all know, that I love to do mock drafts. I'm currently working on my mock draft, which we should be putting out next week. We'll be kind of making another video for that next week. After next week's podcast as well, type situation. But again, just looking at the amount of offensive linemen I have just before the Texans even get to have their draft pick, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and they get the 5th best offensive lineman in the class. And then you just go to their second round pick. There is 6, 7. I haven't gotten that far yet, but I have at least 7, and there's probably going to be more picked before the Texans up at pick number 58.
Yep.
Where again, they are going to need a shitload of offensive linemen. And again, you had 5 players taken before you even had on the offensive line. So that means you were getting the 6th best, theoretically, offensive lineman in the class. And by the time you get your second pick, which would probably be another offensive lineman, who knows which one that's going to be.
Yep.
It's...
Oh, I know. It's a bit of a head scratcher as to why they opted to go away from Laremy Tunsil, because that would be, like, yes, he's a little older. He's not going to be there throughout all of this, but having such a dominant force at that blind side to where you don't have to worry about it and you can build around that would have been so key. Yes, you got some good picks back. You know, you got a 3rd rounder this year. You got a 2nd rounder next year. You know, odds are that will be the pick that ends up sort of replacing Laremy Tunsil, will be that 2nd rounder next year. But that's next year. And that's CJ Stroud's 4th year. And then you guys have to decide to pick up his option 5th year and decide whether this is actually the direction you want to go. Like, this rebuild is snowballing quickly out of control on the Texans. And while I'm surprised, at the same time, I think about it and I go, I'm not really that surprised. It's the Texans.
Yeah, they have made weird moves. Like, this is the same team and organization that traded away DeAndre Hopkins for pennies on the dime and for David Johnson from the Cardinals, where you're looking at that going, like, you have a washed running back, and I think they gave up like a 2nd round pick when they ultimately did that, or they only got back like a 2nd round pick when DeAndre Hopkins was at his prime, like his very, very best. It's just like the Texans, they're just a confusing team, a team that should be trying to compete for a Super Bowl, and they're just trying to go backwards. Another team that is having a very interesting offseason is the 49ers. Now, we've known for years that the 49ers, the credit card payment is coming up, and we've been saying it's like, okay, like, you got shit lucky with Brock Purdy. But when he gets time for that contract, like, yeah, like, you need to be really sure that he is the guy. I think Brock Purdy with the 49ers in that Shanahan system, he's going to be a capable quarterback of being able to win a bunch of games. He's the prototypical guy where you say you can win with him, not because of him. But boy, oh boy, the players that the 49ers have lost this offseason. Aaron Banks, guard, goes to the Packers. Travarius Ward goes to the Colts. Tail Hufanga goes to the Broncos. Dre Greenlaw goes to the Broncos. Javon Hargrave goes to the Vikings. Jalen Moore goes to the Chiefs. Macklin Collins goes to the Browns. Leonard Floyd goes to the Falcons. Isaac Yandam goes to the Saints. Joshua Dobbs goes to the Patriots. Elijah Mitchell goes to the Chiefs. Charlie Heck goes to the Buccaneers. Brandon Allen goes to the Titans. And Demetrius Flanagan Fowles goes to the Giants. Now, a bunch of those names, not really, like, they're who cares type moves. You're losing Aaron Banks, who the Packers overpaid the hell out of. He's an average guard that they're paying elite money to. But still, like, that's a average guard that you're losing. Travarius Ward, who is a really, really solid corner, walks to the Colts. Hufanga and Greenlaw, both really impactful defensive players. Hufanga was, I think he's a 2-time Pro Bowler at safety. They just casually walk over to the Broncos. Hargrave, he's an all right defensive tackle, but he's still a guy that was useful on that defensive line. Leonard Floyd, he was a versatile edge rusher. Elijah Mitchell was a decent running back for you to have in that rotation. You're just looking at this going like, man, like, what are we doing? And then we just look at the guys that they're bringing in to replace. Luke Farrell, tight end, 3 years. Can you tell me where Luke Farrell played before that?
Nope.
I don't know if I even heard of this guy prior to this. And
Right.
I'm just looking up his statistics over his career. Played in Jacksonville. His best year was in 2023, had 411 receiving yards in 8 games started, 15 catches or 15 targets on 13 receptions. So you're just kind of looking at that going, no receiving touchdowns, backup tight end without a doubt. But that's not necessarily a move that screams like, oh, this is a big one. Demarcus Robinson, a wide receiver, again, trying to just bring in some depth there. Kyle Juszczyk, who they released and then re-signed. Mac Jones, backup quarterback. There's not really anyone on this where you go, oh, like, this is a great move to replace this guy. Like Richie Grant to come in and replace Hufanga. Right?
Exactly. Well, and we also got to keep in mind, like, that list you gave earlier was everybody who left in free agency. They also traded away Deebo Samuel.
Mm-hmm.
They're also shopping for a trade partner for Brandon Ayuk. And so this team is being dismantled now, as we anticipated it would be. And all of a sudden, that Super Bowl window for the San Francisco 49ers has been slammed shut and boarded up.
Yeah, it is one of those things where, again, we've been talking about for years of how this 49ers team, they just have all-star after all-star. They're paying the most amount of money to a certain position with this guy and that guy. And like I will say, like, the 49ers have been a very good organization. They've been loyal to the players that they've needed to be. They're kind of the opposite of what we've talked about with the Seattle Seahawks, of where they've always tried to go out there and win. And they've done enough job, but they've kind of done a similar situation with the Rams, of where they've been really in for a while, but they've still had draft picks to utilize, as opposed to the Rams just sending every draft pick away. But now it's time to pay the credit card, and they're finding out the tough way.
Yeah, and really, I think the most telling part of this first week of free agency that the 49ers are in trouble and going the wrong direction was the fact that Joey Bosa chose to sign with the Buffalo Bills instead of play with his brother in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Over $200,000 difference.
Yeah.
That was the difference between the contracts offered from the 49ers and the Bills. And he went, I'm not going to win anything with the 49ers, even though I get to play with my brother. I'd rather go to the Bills, where maybe I have a shot to win if we can get past Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
So that was the most telling to me, because we've talked about it for years that the Bosa brothers have wanted to play together. They've wanted to get together at some point. And the opportunity was there for Joey this year. And he went, the odds of the 49ers being competitive is so low that I just can't do it, even for, $200,000 more.
Yeah, it's yeah. Yeah, like that's a really big telling sign that this 49ers team is going to be really interesting. And I think it ultimately goes to tell, we can look at this NFC West division and pretty easily say who we think the favorite is going to be, because the Seattle Seahawks, who knows what that team is going to be. Like, Sam Darnold is not going to be a magician like he was last year. He's not going to throw for over 4,000 yards. He's not going to get 30 touchdowns. I would be insanely shocked. I will say this. If Sam Darnold throws for over 4,000 yards and 30 passing touchdowns this year, I'll buy a Sam Darnold Seattle Seahawks jersey. Like, I just don't think that's going to happen.
No.
And you have the 49ers, who are going to take a back step this year. The Cardinals, they're doing whatever. They're just going to be average. So it's really the Rams that are looking at this division going, this is ours to lose, and we're kind of in a new Super Bowl window, because we know Matthew Stafford is kind of on this finite line here at the moment. This is probably his last year, so we need to kind of get this going here.
Yeah, I mean, I look at that NFC West division, it's one team that is ready to win now, and three wild cards really. Like the Rams are the best team. They were the best team in that division last year. The
Yes.
problem was because so many of the guys were a little bit older, we saw injuries start to catch up, and that's what hampered them through that middle section of the season and why they were playing catch up to get to the playoffs. But really, if there's any team in the NFC overall, barring what we haven't seen from, say, your Chicago Bears, that really has a chance to knock off the Eagles, I'd say it's the LA Rams. That's probably the most competitive option to go up against the Eagles right now in the NFC. And those other three teams, we expect to see a backslide from the 49ers, which is scary because they already had that backslide last year. And then what's Christian McCaffrey going to be like? He's got more surgeries happening to these legs, and I don't know if he's ever going to be the same. Will he ever even play? Like, we don't know what's going to happen there. The Cardinals, I think, are the most intriguing wild card because they've been improving. They made a couple of good acquisitions in free agency, and if they hit on another draft this year, they could be competitive. They were competitive last year, shockingly to a lot of people, and then just fell flat near the end. With the Cardinals, though, if they end up not being competitive this year, I feel like that has to be the writing on the wall for Kyler Murray in Arizona, and they need to do something different there because you've got a guy in Marvin Harrison Jr. you've got to make use of. But the 49ers, they're just, I don't know. I don't know what they're going to be able to do. I don't know what they're going to look like. And if they fall far enough back, really, can you justify giving Brock Purdy that big contract? At that point, that $45 million that they offered him already, you look at it and go, yeah, you should probably take that, Brock, because it's not going to get any better. And if you walk, I don't know if a team's going to pay you more after seeing what happened this season. Unless he puts this team on his shoulders and all of a sudden becomes one of those quarterbacks that you go, wow, we can win because of him. I don't think he's going to inflate his stock at all.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with the 49ers this season. And speaking of the Cardinals, they added Josh Sweat. That was kind of their big ticket free agent signing, again, coming over from the Eagles, 27 years old, signs a 4-year, $76.1 million deal with a total of $41 million fully guaranteed. So again, we know the Cardinals and Jonathan Gannon, they are run. Jonathan Gannon, he's a defensive minded coach, and we all know my feelings on defensive minded coaches, and I don't think but yeah, if the Cardinals struggle this year, it's going to be the writing on the wall for both Kyler Murray and Jonathan Gannon because this is year 4 for him. Yeah, this is going to be year 4 for him, and so he really year 3. My apologies. It's going to be year 3 for him, and if he can't get it done this year, or at least show drastic improvement this year, it's not going to happen. And both of those guys will likely kind of be gone. But one of the teams we do need to talk about is the New England Patriots. They had the most amount of money to spend this year, and they spent it. Yep. Again, we talked about Milton Williams being out there. Carlton Davis comes over from the Lions, a big time acquisition in the secondary. So now you have Christian Gonzalez and Carlton Davis as your corners. Those are two really, really solid corners. Harold Landry comes over from the Titans again, has a lot of familiarity with what Vrabel wants to do. And so you kind of have a little bit more. Robert Spillane comes over from the Raiders. That's a big loss for the Raiders. That's a big time loss.
And a big gain for the Patriots.
Massive gain. Like the way that I think both of us would describe Robert Spillane. Again, you had Spillane in Pittsburgh for years, and as someone who just watches all football, Robert Spillane, he isn't a top linebacker, but he just does everything right. Like he just goes out there. He is not the best cover guy. He's not the best run stuffer. He just goes out there and he just does his job. He's your 9-to-5 middle linebacker that just puts in good work. And
yeah, he's just a textbook linebacker. Doesn't make a lot of mistakes and often finds himself in the right spot. He's not going to be explosive. He's not going to be game changing, but he's going to be able to shut down his section of the field.
Yep. The other big move they made was Morgan Moses, the right tackle. That was the only real acquisition that they made on the offensive line. So a lot of these moves have been we are bolstering our defense. Now, granted, the Patriots needed to bolster their defense. They did. They were just a bad team all around. So any free agent move that they were bringing in was going to be a positive because they needed better team. But this Patriots team, they've gone out there and they signed defensive guys. Vrabel's a defensive minded coach, so it makes sense. But
Exactly.
boy, oh boy, do you need to figure out your offense, because the Patriots right now, it's Drake May. Like, if Drake May fails, the Patriots fail. And they haven't done anything to properly make that team better. Again, Morgan Moses is a better tackle than what they currently had at right tackle.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit older in the tooth. Mac Hollins, that doesn't move the needle for me at wide receiver. He's a good complementary piece, and he was fun in Buffalo. And you know, he's a really quirky guy who likes to walk around in funny outfits with no shoes on. But is that kind of the needle moving wide receiver move that you want to see for your young quarterback?
No, exactly. But I mean, I don't think any of us are surprised to see Mike Vrabel's first moves be primarily, hey, we're going to build this defense and make it so teams can't score on us. And then we're going to worry about the offense after. That is exactly what I expected from Mike Vrabel.
Me too.
The good news for them is they're sitting with the 4th overall pick.
Yes.
You've got Drake May already in place. Odds are we're going to see Ward and Sanders go 1-2 or 1-3, which means either Travis Hunter or Alshon Jeffrey are likely going to be there at number 4. And so you can get a big playmaking option at that 4th pick if you so choose. And it wouldn't shock me either to see the Patriots go out there and make a trade for a wide receiver somewhere. You know, maybe that's where Brandon Ayuk ultimately ends up landing if the 49ers can get a deal done there. If things aren't working out in Pittsburgh, I could definitely see them trying to ship George Pickens over there for a late round, 5th, 6th, 7th pick. So something like that. So this is still rebuild for the Patriots. This was an excellent start at a rebuild. You're still, near the bottom of that division because your offense needs a lot of work. You need receivers. You need a tight end. I know you've got Stevenson for your running back, and I think he's still got 3 years left on that contract. So, it makes it less likely they go for a guy like Genty. But I think they'll be able to get it done through the draft over the next couple of seasons, because this Patriots team is probably going to still finish near the bottom next year. I expect they'll still have a top 8 pick probably next year.
Top 10.
And so a couple seasons of that, if they're focusing on offense, getting some offensive linemen in there, it wouldn't even shock me to see them do that with that 4th overall pick and just take the best O lineman available in the draft.
I look at Will Campbell for them and go, that is just an insanely good option. Again, with Will Campbell's arm length, he's probably going to be shifted into at the guard position, and there comes a little bit of complications with his stance. He's never really been in that low stance. He's always been upright from the tackle spot, so he's going to have that learning adjustment. But yeah, for me, if you're the Patriots in the draft with that 4th overall pick, you take whoever you think is the best offensive lineman in the class. Like, you need to protect Drake May, and they haven't so far.
No, exactly. I mean, that's always a possibility of them moving back 3 or 4 spots as well and accruing some extra draft capital and still able to get the second best lineman available in the draft. Or, I mean, depending on how far back they move and who they're switching with, they may still get the best offensive lineman available in the draft while still accruing some additional draft capital. So, I mean, this Patriots team is making some moves in the right direction. It's never sexy to see a team just focus on defense when their offense was so bad last year. And you've got a young rookie in Drake May, well, not rookie anymore, but a young quarterback in Drake May that you're hoping to build this team around. They've got to get him protection. They've got to get him weapons.
Without a doubt. Moving forward to one of our teams now, and this is kind of one of those weird years where, as a Bears fan, I can say, talking to the Steelers fan, I'm looking down going, what the fuck are you guys doing? And I think you are kind of also looking towards me going, what the hell are we doing? Because we knew the quarterback position was the most important thing for this Pittsburgh Steelers team to figure out. And again, it was, the week prior to, like all of last week before we got to Monday was, well, the Steelers are focusing their efforts into Justin Fields, which both of us said, good, do that.
Yep. Yep.
Justin Fields made it known that he was only going to sign with the Steelers if he was guaranteed to be the starter. And the Steelers said no.
Yeah. I don't know. And Omar Khan last week was like, hey, Steelers fans, you're going to be happy with what happens on Monday. And so a lot of us were assuming the quarterback was going to be decided. And granted, like, with what happened and what came out on Monday, I was happy, getting DK Metcalf, signing Darius Slay. Those were two excellent moves. I was like, okay, that's great. Who's the quarterback? Okay, you're giving DK Metcalf a 5-year deal. Who's throwing him the football? Like right now, all we have is Kyle Allen. Oh, he's now signed elsewhere. We have no quarterback on the roster. What are you guys doing? And so, obviously it became just this circus show all week long of where's Aaron Rodgers going to sign? Where's Russell Wilson going to sign? It's basically the two of them fighting it out for the Steelers, the Giants, and the Vikings. Who's going where? And it's getting a little bit old. Thankfully, as the week progressed, they did sign a quarterback. They agreed to a 2-year deal, $8 million a year, with former third-round pick of the Steelers, Mason Rudolph, which, honestly, I love. He was the guy they drafted to replace Ben Roethlisberger. He's willing to come back. When I saw that happen, yes, part of me is like, well, we still need a better quarterback than that. But at the same time, I go, should we just roll with Mason Rudolph? Give him that shot. Draft a rookie this year and go, okay, look, this is your shot. If you can beat this rookie, then you can be the starter this year. And just see what Mason Rudolph's got. Because really with this unique, I guess, offense that Arthur Smith calls, you don't need a flashy quarterback in there necessarily. And we've seen Mason Rudolph can sling the ball. He's not afraid to take a hit. He can bomb that ball out, which is good for Pickens and DK Metcalf. And so when I saw that, I was like, thank God, I hope this pulls us out of the Aaron Rodgers sweepstakes. After Justin Fields dropped off early on in those first couple of days, I was disappointed. But at that point, I was like, okay, Russell Wilson, just give him the spot. And I don't know why Mike Tomlin is so fixated on getting Aaron Rodgers. I get it. 5 years ago, that would have been a great signing. That would have been a great move to make, getting Aaron Rodgers in here 5 years ago. But now it's just not. He's a problem in locker rooms. He won't show up to training camp. He's going to cause more issues. And we already have two divas at wide receiver in DK Metcalf and George Pickens. Do you really want to put Aaron Rodgers in there and just basically have him pouring kerosene on that fire? Like, I really hope that signing of Rudolph pushes Aaron Rodgers away from the Steelers and he can go sign with the Giants. I don't know what's going to happen with Russell Wilson. The rumor I'm hearing is he's going to, for a second year in a row, steal Kenny Pickett's starting job away from him and sign with Cleveland, which I think would be a little hilarious, just to see Kenny Pickett lose his starting spot twice in a row to Russell Wilson. But man, I don't know. The Steelers, they kind of dropped the ball on figuring out their quarterback's situation. And now it's a point of, it's too late to start the rebuild. You should have made those moves before free agency started. So now it really is Mason Rudolph, draft a rookie, and hope that you win that lottery.
Yeah, there's not a lot that can really be said about this Steelers offseason other than it should be nothing more than just pure disappointment. And I know there are Steelers fans out there that are sitting back going like, it can't be a disappointing offseason. We got DK Metcalf. And I've been saying that the Steelers need to improve their wide receiver room because George Pickens is a good receiver, but he's not an elite receiver. DK Metcalf, I think both of us would agree he's a top 25 receiver in the NFL.
Yep.
He's not top 15. He's definitely not top 10. He's somewhere in that middle range of the top 20 to top 25. Which again, you need one of those receivers. You do.
And with upside, like he could be better than that.
Yes.
It's just he's had Geno Smith as a quarterback.
Yeah.
And now he's got also who the hell knows as a quarterback.
And
so
that was going to be my next point is it's fine to upgrade at wide receiver and get a big boost in your production, but the question was going to be who the hell is throwing him the ball? And again, the Steelers made that trade before free agency signed. And to me, when I saw that move, I went, this is a move where if you were trying to show Justin Fields that you are serious about him being the guy, this is one of those moves where you go, we're bringing in a top tier receiver for you to throw the ball to and have more options with. And again, that whole thing where Fields said, I want to stay with Pittsburgh, but I want to be guaranteed the starting quarterback role. And the Steelers, for whatever reason, because again, I think it was you that might have been telling me this, where it was basically there's two camps. It's the ownership and Khan want Justin Fields, but Mike Tomlin wanted Russell Wilson, and there was that little bit of tension.
Yeah.
Justin Fields is a 25-year-old, that 2-year, $40 million deal with $30 million guaranteed going to the Jets, so that's $20 million a season.
Right?
Like, now, I've been kind of sitting back and saying, I still think the issues that Fields has are still there from even his rookie season. His processor is way too goddamn slow. But, you have the same offensive coordinator, so he's not going to have to learn a new offense. With the Jets, he's going to have to learn a new offense. Like, why couldn't the Steelers just simply say, we're going to guarantee you the starting quarterback role this year? Like, we're not going to bring in a veteran. We're not going to do that. And, like, for instance, with the Mason Rudolph deal, it's an 8-year deal, or it's an $8 million deal, $4 million a season for those 2 years. So you're not exactly saying to Mason Rudolph, like, oh, we're really investing in you, because he's, like, over those 2 years, he's making less than most backups do.
Yeah, no, I mean, when they signed him, it was to be the number 2.
Yeah.
They told him we're bringing you in as the backup again. But that was sort of my personal take. I looked at it and I went, give this guy a shot.
Oh, I'm in agreement with you. I think Mason Rudolph should be the starter this year because he's a hell of a lot better than what Aaron Rodgers is. Okay, he might not be better than what Aaron Rodgers is going to give you in terms of production, but he's not going to be a cancer. Now,
he'll be better in the locker room than Aaron Rodgers would be for sure. And I mean, we go back 2 years ago and he ended up having to play due to injuries to Kenny Pickett and very bad play to Trubisky. And we were like, oh my God, he's balling out. He was the best quarterback for us that season.
Well, and then Kenny Pickett was healthy at one point, and they said, listen, kid, we're going to stick with Mason for the rest of the year, including going into the playoffs.
Yeah.
And like that's when we all kind of knew Kenny Pickett was no longer the quarterback for the long-term option for the quarterback at Steelers. But yeah, like this whole situation for the Steelers, because again, the guys that they brought in, Malik Harrison, linebacker, 2 years, $10 million deal, not a bad little signing for them. Darius Slay on a 1-year deal. Slay last year he definitely showed his age without a doubt, but he's still a solid signing to have opposite of Joey Porter Jr. They've basically just been saying Joey Porter Jr. is our number 1 corner and we're putting in insert veteran name here. That's kind of been their philosophy. Kenneth Gainwell is a guy that is probably a decent number 2 to have on a team, or a number 3 in a really strong back room. But again, you lost Najee Harris, which was not a shock by any means. You guys placed the tag, or not the tag, franchise tag, but a tender on
Jalen Warren.
yeah, thank you. I always forget his name for whatever reason. But yeah, so like you're gonna have Jalen Warren back next year.
Yep.
But the running back position kind of took a little bit of hit. Gainwell comes in and kind of smooths that bumpiness out a little bit. But yeah, this entire offseason to me for the Steelers, again, it's not the offseason has just started, so there could be a lot of differences here. There's nothing to say that the Steelers don't just sit back and say, you know what, we're gonna call up Arizona and bring in Kyler Murray.
Right.
You know, their team.
Not outside the realm of possibility. I've also heard that they may be talking to New Orleans about bringing Derek Carr in.
Yep.
Another option. One that has now gone away is the Kirk Cousins option. Kirk Cousins has stated that he plans to stay in Atlanta as the backup.
And as of today, it's official now. Like the Falcons had till today, I think by 12 o'clock our time to get that, and tweets have shown that Atlanta hasn't made any of those moves. So like he's with the Falcons unless someone gives them a good enough deal.
Exactly.
He's gonna remain an Atlanta Falcon.
Right. And so, yeah, I mean, we knew going into this, and you know me, I'm ever the optimist when it comes to my team because they always find ways to win.
Mm-hmm.
We knew that the quarterback free agency class was not very strong.
Yeah,
we talked about Sam Darnold coming to a defensive-minded team that probably wouldn't pan out very well. Justin Fields was the best option. They just didn't want to offer him the money and the starting role, which was a little bit mind-boggling. And as a result of that, though, you've slighted Russell Wilson, who now has decided he's going to shop himself around elsewhere as well. The guy who ultimately really wanted to re-sign in Pittsburgh, and you probably could have gotten him long before day one if you just went, yeah, Russ, here's a 2-year deal. And so now you're stuck in this limbo of possibly landing with Aaron Rodgers. And, we've talked about it before. I think Aaron Rodgers is the worst possible scenario because of the negativity. You look at the talent he had in New York with the Jets and how badly he did there. People are like, oh no, it's Aaron Rodgers. He'll be able to take this Steelers team to the next level. And I'm like, no. Aaron Rodgers, I think, is the only quarterback signing that the Steelers could make that results in a guaranteed first losing season for Mike Tomlin. Like, I look at some of the other guys available, and if it's not Mason Rudolph, I go, take a chance on Jameis Winston. Take a chance on Carson Wentz. Take a shot with Joe Flacco if you have to. Let him continue his tour through the AFC North. Any of those, to me, are more desirable than Aaron Rodgers. Ultimately, keep pushing for Russell Wilson if you can. Something. Because, yes, drafting a quarterback should still be a priority. But we don't want to spend that first rounder on it. We don't want to have another Kenny Pickett situation where you're overdrafting just because you're desperate. We've got Mason Rudolph in there. We should try to find a veteran that we can say, okay, he can compete for the job as well. And then in the second round, you go and you look, okay, Jackson Dart,
Jackson Dart's not going to be there in the second.
No, he's not going to be there. But we've said that about quarterbacks before. The thing with the draft is it is always a roller coaster. Guys end up falling that we don't expect. And so that's why I still include him there because we've seen it happen before. Dart, Gabriel, Milrow, Ewers. Like, there's lots of options that are project quarterbacks. Ewers probably is the best looking one for what we've got at the wide receiver position, a guy that will sling the ball. But you got to take one of those in the second round if there's still any available. And really, it's going to be a quarterback battle in training camp. We'll see who comes out. Unfortunately, the Steelers team will likely still end with 9 to 11 wins because this defense got better. The defense will hold them in games. And thankfully, the rest of their AFC North competitors have not really been improving much. And so it's still going to be a shot to win that division to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
But I don't know, man.
Yeah.
I said it before all this started out that I would have preferred them to start the rebuild now and shop TJ Watt, try to get a couple of firsts, and prepare to trade up for one of the big quarterbacks next year. They've chosen not to do that, so now they're gambling with, is it
Whoever
going
they
to be
bring
enough
in.
to get past? I don't think it will. This right now, as things have panned out, it screams to me another wild card exit, another pick 20 next year, and another missing out on the top quarterbacks.
Yeah. And last thing I will say about this Steelers thing, and I know you are one of the more sensible Steelers fans that sits back and goes, I don't want anything to do with Aaron Rodgers. There are a lot of Steelers fans that are out there that are saying, bring me Aaron Rodgers. And if you just look at his stats from last year, almost 4,000 passing yards, 3,897, 28 touchdowns to only 11 interceptions. Now, he was sacked 40 times as well. So you look at those numbers and you go, those aren't Aaron Rodgers numbers, but by any stretch of the imagination, like there was this running joke for a while with Aaron Rodgers. If like people would be like, "Oh, he had a bad year," he's like, "Yeah, my bad years are your, franchise record years," and that's that's still a pretty damn good season for Aaron Rodgers at this point. So it's not like he's bad in terms of production. It's the person that comes in that you'd be worried with. And yeah, like I've been saying this offseason, I would completely steer away from anything Aaron Rodgers wise. I just think that would be a massive, massive mistake for the Steelers or the Vikings or the Giants. I think they should
I could be completely wrong. Aaron Rodgers could come in and be that thing that pushes the Steelers over that hump and we win a playoff game because he does still have those good numbers. But it's just, for me, it came down to that personality issue. He's not going to show up for training camp. He's going to be a problem in the locker room. And what's going to happen is these young guys are going to see that and they're going to start emulating it.
They're going to sit back and act like if he can do this, then I can do this.
Right? And then you're going to have some of the veterans that don't have the tolerance for that. A guy like TJ Watt, you see a move like that could ultimately result in him going, I'm not re-signing here next year.
Well,
right?
And going on top of that, and this is another thing that we are going to have to talk about is, do the Steelers even want to re-sign TJ Watt for the price tag he's going to ask for? And again, we're going to talk about this a little bit down the road because I think both of us are baffled by the situation that we're going to talk about there. And like it's something that definitely needs to be discussed for sure. But yeah, like I'm baffled by it.
The baffled is I'm not that surprised that the Cleveland Browns absolutely disrupted another market for positional players.
Yeah,
because
I'm not shocked by that either. I'm shocked at the player's decision. And again, you probably, if you're watching football and you know football, you probably already have a really good idea of who we're talking about here. But yeah, no, right now the Steelers are a little bit just kind of you just don't really know. It's hard to know what the Steelers are going to be. You put it best where the Steelers right now, they're probably going to be a 9 to 11 win team next year. They're going to make the playoffs. They're going to get bounced in the wild card round, and we're going to go right down this exact road again next year where it's okay, what's your decision? And this is where I have been so annoyed with the Steelers for the last 5 years where it's been pick a direction because you haven't done it. And it's like I'm annoyed by it and I'm not a fan, so I only know how much it's annoying towards you as a fan.
Well, and they've got to sort out their problems with picking in the first round. The last 5 first-round picks the Steelers have had, none of them have had their options picked up. None of them play for the Pittsburgh Steelers anymore. And that is a problem. They need to resolve this and find a way to pick the right guy in the first round.
Yeah.
It's great that we have phenomenal picks rounds 3 to 6. That is great.
Yep.
But if you're not cashing in on your first rounder at
It's a problem.
least every second year, that is a problem.
Yep.
Exactly. And it has been 5 years now of pick after pick after pick where we don't pick up their option. We let them walk in free agency. We trade them away, whatever it ends up being. And it is not a good look. It's something that Omar Khan needs to resolve now. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens this year in the draft, because I have seen a lot of different directions for this 21st overall pick for the Steelers, from wide receiver to quarterback to defensive tackle. Like it's all over the place right now. Even offensive line, we lost a big piece. Was it
Monday.
James Daniels?
James
I
Daniels,
believe.
he went away.
Yeah, James Daniels went elsewhere. Luckily, that's the only one we lost. I mean, Dan Moore Jr. as well, but we still have big left tackle, big right tackle, great center last year in Frazier, and we still have Isaac Swamolo as well. So
Yep, and you also lost Nate Herbig as well.
yeah, but
But
Nate
he was a
Herbig was
backup.
sort of a rotational
Yeah.
interior lineman, and so that's one they'll pick somebody up in like the 4th round or something, and he'll fill that role, or they'll sign somebody late in the offseason. So be it.
Yeah,
But like
going back
that
to what you're saying with the first round picks, because I agree with you again. You lost a couple of guys that on the offensive line that aren't anything. 2020 didn't have a first round pick. That obviously was due to the trade for Minka Fitzgerald. And then the year after at pick 24, you selected Najee Harris, again no longer on the team. He moved away going into the 2022 NFL draft. I believe, was this the year that you guys traded up? No, it wasn't.
no, that 2022, that was Kenny Pickett. No.
Yeah, Kenny
No.
Pickett. It was 2022, so that was your guys' first round pick in that one. 2023, I believe, was offensive line. Broderick Jones, you guys traded up for that, and Broderick Jones hasn't exactly looked like he's going to be.
He will be the starting left tackle this year. Yeah, and when I say last 5 first rounds, it's the guys who have come up to the end of their contracts essentially, and so that it stops at Kenny Pickett at this point.
Yeah,
it's the Kenny Pickett and the 5 prior, because since then the last 2 have been Broderick Jones and Troy Fautanu.
Yeah, no, and I wasn't really going to include those guys. I was just going back to 2020 just to kind of get a solid baseline.
Yeah,
but yeah,
it's Kenny Pickett, Najee Harris, Terrell Edmonds, Devin Bush.
Yep.
And I'm forgetting who the 5th one was, but there's another one in there that no longer is in Pittsburgh. The option was not picked up.
Yeah, so. and it's a tough situation to deal with for sure. But it's going to be interesting to see what ultimately happens. I know from my perspective, I think you're done with the quarterbacks in terms of the free agent market. You just say to everyone else, I think we're good, guys. I think, Russell Wilson, I think you even say to him, you're like, you know what, we're good. And I think at pick 21, you select Jackson Dart. You say to him, listen, you need to beat out Mason Rudolph. If you can't beat out Mason Rudolph, you're going to be the backup for the year.
Yeah.
And it's a really shitty situation, and it kind of puts you in that realm of a Kenny Pickett, but Kenny Pickett was in a historically awful quarterback class. This is just a kind of average bad quarterback class where it's like, okay, like you have a couple of guys at the start of the class where you're like, this guy's good, but is he like generational? And at least with Jackson Dart, if you would have put him into that Kenny Pickett class, Jackson Dart probably would have gone ahead of Kenny Pickett. But yeah, it's one of those really tough situations for the Steelers, and one that we are likely going to continue to monitor for the rest of this offseason, just to kind of ultimately see exactly where they are going to go.
Yeah, and you're probably right. This is likely where they stop for free agency, which, as I said earlier, I don't think they should. I think they should still push Russell Wilson and see if they can convince him to come back. Or, as I mentioned not that long ago, Jameis Winston, man.
Yep.
He had a great year last year with Cleveland, and he is a great locker room presence.
He's a great
which
human
would be
being.
such a good thing for this locker room, especially.
Just don't put him around crab legs.
Around what?
Crab legs.
Crab legs? Yeah.
Dude has a habit of being a naughty boy when around crab legs. You don't remember that story from Florida State?
I don't.
So
No.
he got arrested on campus for stealing crab legs at Florida State. It's one of the most bizarre stories that you will ever read.
That was a long time ago too. That was while he was still blind as well.
Yes.
And so
yes.
like
when he
can
still
see
thought
now,
Bruce
so-
Arians was black.
right? and that's what I mean. He's such a funny, calm, relaxed presence.
He's going to be an amazing church priester after his career is done.
Right? He would be a really good thing for some of these young guys like George Pickens, I really think. And so that with what's still available out there, if you can't get Russell Wilson, try to bring Jameis Winston and maybe he's not going to do anything special for you. He's not going to win you an extra 3 or 4 games, but just he's not Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah. Yeah, he's not going to be a cancer.
That man like the plague.
Yeah. Talked about your Pittsburgh Steelers, and again, how, as someone who's a Chicago Bears fan, kind of looking at this going like, the Bears, again, Bears fans like to joke that we've been the offseason champs for the last 3 years in a row, including this year. Again, the first year was when we made that trade for DJ Moore and, absolutely fleeced the Carolina Panthers. Last year, it was getting both Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze. And this year, it's, again, you get Ben Johnson, and he comes in, and we talked about some of the trades that happened last week in Joe Thuney and Jonah Jackson, and it was like, oh, wow, like, the Bears, they're going out there and they're saying to themselves, we have a quarterback who we really believe in. We're going to protect this guy who was sacked the most in the NFL. I'm like, okay, great. Go out there and sign Drew Dalman, who's the number 1 center in both free agency and in the draft. Go get that guy. They signed him. He was the Bears' first signing, and the Bears made him the second highest paid center in the NFL. Drew Dalman took less to come to the Chicago Bears than other teams because he believed in what Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams are going to be able to do. And to hear that, you're like, ooh, this is something I don't know if I've heard over my time as a Bears fan, of going, people are coming to the Bears because of A, the quarterback, and B, who the coach is. I'm like, this is a little bit shocking, and it's a warm, fuzzy feeling that I don't know I like yet. And
no, because it all looks great. The signings, the new head coach, the great quarterback, it all looks great. But there's still, those Bears concerns of, well, is it going to work? And I get that, because as hyped as Ben Johnson has been, we don't know how he's going to do as a head coach yet.
Yep.
He could turn out to be one of these guys that you look at and go, you should have stayed an offensive coordinator. Yep. So we don't know. He's said all the right things, yes.
He's done all the right things as well.
Right? But we've seen other coaches do that in the past before too. And then, when we get to that first coin flip in week 1, all of a sudden they forget how to...
It's when the bullets start to fly, how does he react? It's kind of like what we talk about quarterbacks. You can be great on first down when you're not getting pressure in your face, but when it's the fourth quarter and you're down by a score and you are on a 4th down play and you need to make that, do you crumble or do you shine? And again, but what the Bears have done this offseason, again, they've completely rechanged their offensive line. Again, starting the process at the end of, or going into the combine, Ben Johnson was asked, can you quickly change this offensive line? And he goes, yeah, teams have done it. They've completely overhauled their O-line and turned it into a really solid unit. You get Joe Thuney, who is one of the best guards in NFL history. You get Jonah Jackson, who already knows the system with Ben Johnson. You get Drew Dalman, who I've been saying for weeks is a perfect fit for a Ben Johnson type system. But then the other free agent signings that they made, again, Grady Jarrett was released on Monday by the Falcons, defensive tackle, and then 5 hours later, he's signing a deal with the Chicago Bears. And again, I initially looked at this move and went, Grady Jarrett is a really, really solid guy to have because he is that three technique that the Bears have been missing. Granted,
Yep.
he's 32 years old, but if you watched him play last year, he didn't look like a 32-year-old playing. He's just going to be a calming presence to that defensive line that has had years of experience and is just going to, like, the Bears had 8 captains last year. That's way too damn many captains.
Yeah.
With Joe
Captain
Thuney,
by committee.
exactly. Joe Thuney comes in, he's going to be a captain. Like that dude like is a captain. Grady Jarrett, this guy comes in, you know this guy's going to be a captain. He's deserved that. He's a 2-time Pro Bowler. He was an All-Pro in one of the years he went to the Pro Bowl, and you just look at that and go like that's a really solid move. Deo Odengbo, the edge rusher coming over from the Colts. Now, you look at his production. It's not elite production, which scares the hell out of me because the last 2 edge rushers that the Bears have signed in free agency, the first being, funny enough, another Colts edge rusher, and that was Al-Qadim Muhammad, who came off of a 1-year really successful year, and that was the only production we saw, sucked. And then the Bears immediately went after DeMarcus Walker, who again was a 1-year production guy, and then sucked. And so this is one of those things where I'm going, please, for the love of God, stop signing 1-year production guys. And
Yeah.
Odengbo, while he's only going to be 25 years old going into next season, still, like, his traits are unbelievable. 6'6", 280 pounds, can outrun running backs in some cases. Like, he is a specimen of an athlete. I just go, he's been in the league for 4 years. The most sacks he's ever had in a season was 8, and that wasn't even last year. That was the year before. Like, I just go, man, you're putting a lot on Dennis Allen's plate to develop this guy. And, you know, to Odengbo's credit, he said, I'm not a finished product yet. I'm still pretty raw, which, again, worries the hell out of me when you've been in the league for 4 years and you're still saying you're raw.
Yeah.
But if Dennis Allen can get the most out of him, that can be a scary defensive line. Again, you have Montez Sweat, who I don't think is an elite edge rusher. I think he's a great edge rusher. But if you have those two guys,
definitely underperformed last season.
yep, 5.5 sacks is not something that I'm particularly happy with as your edge rushing leader and the guy that you're paying $20+ million to go sack the quarterback. But what these moves do in the Grady Jarrett and the Deo Odengbo moves is it gives your defensive line versatility. I like the Grady Jarrett move because that means Andrew Billings and Javon Dexter have a 3-man rotation that they can go into. I really like that 3-man rotation. And at least with Odengbo, you have someone who's going to be a little bit more solidified there. And I still think the Bears are going to draft an edge rusher at some point in their first 3 picks and really make that a 4-man rotation, which will be a lot better. But yeah, it's, as a Bears fan, it's been a really shocking offseason because they've been making all the right moves. Again, we like to say we're armchair GMs. And we go out there and, again, I've been saying you need to bring in guards. You need to go get a Drew Dahlman. And I said last year, you need to go get Caleb Williams and Romo Dunze. They did that. I said you need to go get Drew Dahlman and more interior offensive linemen. They did that. And so, you know, for me, I'm kind of sitting back going like, okay, they're doing all the moves I'm telling them to make. If this goes completely ass backwards, then it's going to look really bad on me for saying you should do these moves, and they're doing it.
Yeah, but I mean that's just it. That would be very Chicago Bears for it to all go wrong on them.
Yep, really, really would be.
But
Obviously,
all of these moves they've made so far, they are, perfect moves because what this has done now is it's made it so that the number 10 pick
it's completely wide open.
you guys aren't looking at it going, we have to get this position and we have to get this position. You're now looking at it going, everything is kind of
it's on the table.
We can get whatever we think is most talented and will benefit us more, not only this year, but 5 years from now? Which guy can we take that's going to help the team now, but we're also going to be wanting to re-sign after his rookie deal? That is a great thing to be, because for the last, God, who knows how long with the Bears, it's always been just we have to get this, like we need this position so desperately. But the problem is it's always like 5 different positions. And so it's been tough.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see a general manager that says he was going to take risk and be aggressive every single year, finally doing it, going into his third year of an offseason, which again, it took a little bit to get there, but we kind of finally got there. Or
It
fourth
always
offseason.
does.
Yeah.
The problem with this league right now is so many owners and so many fans expect turnarounds to be immediate. They expect, oh, we signed this guy as our GM, or we signed this guy as our head coach, so we expect to go from a 4-win team to a 13-win team immediately.
Yeah.
And that's just not realistic.
Yeah, it's completely
It's not how
unrealistic.
it works. You can't just flip an entire team that way. You can flip an entire position set,
Yep.
as Ben Johnson said, you can completely rebuild your own line, but it's usually comes at the cost of not rebuilding anything else. Luckily, the Bears are in a position where that O-line and the D-line a little bit, but more importantly, the O-line was really the biggest flaw on this team. And so you can rebuild that offensive line and go, okay, now we actually might be able to go from 4 wins to 10 wins. Because even last year, that final record for the Bears was very underwhelming and very underperforming.
Yep.
Everybody expected them to be competing in that division, and they rapidly fell to the bottom of it and were an afterthought by the time we got to week 13 even.
Week 8.
Right?
Yeah. Like it was a year where there was expectations for them to be good, and they completely missed the mark. And so again, I kind of have to crawl back into that shell of being a pessimist, of going, they're probably going to screw this up. And until they actually hit the field and they prove to me, like I've been saying the line, I don't want to hear anyone talk about culture in that Chicago Bears building until the culture is you have more than a 500 record. Like to me, that's when you can start talking about culture. Like that's why the Steelers can talk about culture. It's like, yeah, they've had 18 years of above 500 or on 500. Like that, like you can talk about a culture being there at that point.
And that's really almost why the Steelers are due for that under 500, because the last time we had the under 500 was when we were able to draft Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah.
And so like we need to finish so that we can have a top 12 pick at least. Top 10 would be even better. Top 5 would be phenomenal, though I don't think they'll ever finish that low with how it is right now.
Yeah. You would have to have a disaster situation for that to happen.
Exactly. The Bears, yet again are looking like they might finally be on that proper trajectory, but it's a Chicago sports team.
Mm-hmm.
And so you gotta sort of wait and see, unfortunately, because you can have all the pieces in place and still have it just not work.
It's a terrible curse that I have unfortunately given myself to be a Chicago Bears fan. But the last thing that we're going to talk about, and we hinted about it a little bit earlier, and this was the move that happened a few days before free agency. This happened ultimately after we ended our podcast last week, because again, we record these all on Saturday afternoons when we have our most accessible time for both of us to jump on for this. And that was the Cleveland Browns re-signing Myles Garrett. And the entire offseason, both of us sat back and said, there isn't going to be anything the Cleveland Browns can do to retain Myles Garrett, because he said it's not about the money. It's not about the money. It's solely for me wanting to go out there and compete for a championship. And everyone went, yeah, respectable.
Yeah.
Like the Browns are going to get an absolute haul. And the Browns, to their credit, were kind of doing that situation of where they're going, oh, we're not going to trade him. We're not going to trade him. And everyone was just kind of sitting back going like, yeah, look, we get that. You're saying this now, but you're just waiting for the really good deal. You're putting it out there. Oh, we're not trading Myles Garrett, hoping to get a little bit more of a deal to try to get that And we were sitting back the entire time going like, it is just going to be who's going to trade for Myles Garrett and why is it going to be the Washington Commanders?
Yeah.
And then a sneaky little notification popped up from Ian Rappaport. The Cleveland Browns have re-signed Myles Garrett to a 4-year deal, $160 million contract, including $122 million fully guaranteed, average annual salary of $40 million for Myles Garrett, making him the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL. And everyone kind of just collectively went, "What are you doing?"
To both sides.
To both sides,
right? Like it's like the Cleveland Browns organization jumped up and they're like, "Look, my foot's healed from when I shot myself in the Deshaun Watson deal. Want to see what I can do?" And they shot themselves in the other foot.
Yep.
It just I don't get it. Like Myles Garrett, he's like, I won't even re-sign with this team for $159 million. And so they go, what about 160?
Yeah.
And that's just it. Myles Garrett's like, fuck championship. I got $122 million guaranteed.
You know me. I'm always for, if you can get the best deal possible, go take it. Like you take it. And I don't think there was another team out there that would have given Myles Garrett $40 million a season. And
No,
with this, the thing that's confusing the hell out of me with this is that the Browns had the opportunity to look at a team and go, "You're going to give us 2 first-round picks for Myles Garrett plus a handful of other picks for Myles Garrett because he is one of the best players in the NFL." And that was going to kickstart their rebuild. And
Yep.
now you look at this and you go, you still have Deshaun Watson's contract for the next 2 years. There isn't a way to get out of that because you decided to go fully guaranteed on everything. So there's literally no way of getting out of that. Deshaun Watson's not even going to play this year. For all we know, the Browns are going to have Russell Wilson starting for them.
Or Kenny Pickett.
Yeah. And you just, like, I just look at Myles Garrett and go, every single thing that he said during all the or all the interviews that he did was, it's not about the money. I love Cleveland. I love the city. I love the fan base. Like, this is nothing against them. This is just me looking at my legacy as a player and going, if I want to put myself into Canton, the thing that's going to top that off and guarantee me a slot there is if I go and win a Super Bowl.
Yep.
And now he's just said, I guess I'm going to play with Cleveland until 2030, and there's no clear path because, again, in 2 years, when the Deshaun Watson deal is finally gone, well, who's going to be your quarterback at that point? You're still going to have to pay an edge rusher $40 million a season. Like, the Browns completely screwed over the quarterback market a few years ago with Deshaun Watson. Luckily, that deal hasn't completely screwed over the NFL like what we thought it could have done, because, again, we thought players were going to start demanding fully guaranteed contracts like what Deshaun Watson got, and we were going to have to deal with situations like teams do in hockey of where every single deal is fully guaranteed. And that just becomes a bigger problem in and of itself. But you can't tell me that Micah Parsons isn't looking at this deal going, well, if Myles Garrett is getting $40 million a year, I should be getting that. And you can't tell me for a damn fact that TJ Watt isn't looking at this going, well, I've been better than this guy for a lot of years. You can't tell me that I'm not worth $40 million at that point, if not more. So the Cleveland Browns have just completely screwed over the market for a position yet again.
Right? Like the only hope is that all the other teams around the league, or most of the other teams around the league, and the smarter players are going to be looking at it and going, well, I mean, look, it's the Cleveland Browns. And so, yeah, they did that with Deshaun Watson. Look where it got them. They've done that now with Myles Garrett. Look where it's going to get them. They're not going to make playoffs. They're not going to win playoff games. They're not going to have a shot at a championship. And so I think that's what it's going to ultimately be for guys like Micah Parsons, TJ Watt, Trey Hendrickson. I know Hendrickson has said he wants 38 or more, and like teams got to look at that and go, but it's not worth it because like, you got to sit that player down, let's use TJ Watt as an example, sit him down and be like, you're 31. We give you that money. You're not winning a playoff game here. We're not getting better at any point. So you're basically just getting the money. And so for us, which is we want to win, it's in our best interest now to trade you somewhere, and maybe they'll pay you. The odds are they're going to have the same conversation with you that we are, though, and go, look, $40 million for an edge rusher when we could have 3 edge rushers for less than that combined and probably have the same or greater production across those 3 guys. It's not worth it.
Yeah.
And so that's what teams are going to have to do is basically go, yeah, Cleveland Browns are not the trendsetter. They're an example of what not to do because this is what they keep doing. And it's mind-boggling because they could have traded him away, like you said, for a handful of picks, including multiple firsts, and gone to a team where that team's still going to give him probably $34 or $35 million a year.
Yeah,
so it's like,
totally.
okay, over 4 years, you're going to make $20 million less. Does that alter your lifestyle at all? No. And it gives you a shot to win a championship. So it is. It's you got to wonder what is in the water in Cleveland, Ohio, because there are some dumb decisions being made by management, by players. It blows my mind because I look at that and I go, if TJ Watt was 26, fine, then I would consider paying him $40 million. TJ Watt's 31 years old.
Yep.
I don't want the Steelers to give him $40 million.
Yep.
Not worth it. Not unless everything else is in place for the teaming and you go, oh, we got an extra 40 here. We don't need any other positions. We'll give you $40 million for 1 year deal. We're not giving you 4 years of guaranteed anymore, though. It's 1 year. Like if you've got the extra, that's where it becomes okay, sure, we'll give it to you. But most of these players, they want 3-4 year deals. They're going to want, 40 to 60% of that fully guaranteed. And I just don't think it's realistic for a lot of teams to be doing, like I mentioned Trey Hendrickson and the Bengals, like they got to be looking at that going, well, yeah, you're going elsewhere now, man. We're not paying you $38 million because we have so many other problems on defense. Like, are you going to be able to win us 7 games for that $38 million? Because that's what you need to do, and it's silly things out of Cleveland as always seems to happen.
You listen to the way that Josh Allen talked about his contract situation, and he said, someone said, like, you're actually taking $5 million less on this extension. He goes, like, guys, I'm living such a luxurious lifestyle now with what I'm being paid. Is me losing out on $5 million actually going to change anything? I have a beautiful house, a beautiful bride to be, and like I can buy anything that I want and do anything that I want. Like $5 million isn't gonna change my life. Like I'm already living life what most people would just dream of. Like it's and the last thing that I'll say about this is that when listening to Myles Garrett talk in that press conference when he did, and he had the dinosaur toys lined up all in front of him, which was an interesting choice. But him basically just going out there and saying, oh, like this was all like used as a negotiation tactic, and like he was asked the question, well, what are you gonna say to the fans of Cleveland who saw you say, I don't see a hope in winning with this organization, so that's why I'm requesting a trade? Oh, I hope the fans all know that it was never about the money. It was just trying to find the right situation, and it was never against the fan. Like I'm just listening, going like dude, like I get it. We all have a price. We all have a price that we would be willing to do something for that amount of money. Like if you talk with your friends and your boys, you all have that game of like who's going to do the for a certain amount of money. And that's a really bad example of a situation. But like, yeah, like I just look at Myles Garrett and go, was $40 million a season really the price tag for you to say, I'm comfortable with not winning a championship?
Right. And that's really what it is. And I don't know. It's going to make some interesting dominoes fall. We mentioned Mike Parsons, TJ Watt's coming up.
Yep.
Trey Hendrickson is looking for a deal right now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to create some interesting scenarios as to what teams do. I did hear a rumor floated around a couple days ago that, Jerry Jones really wants to sign Mike Parsons, but as a result, he now has to ship Dak Prescott out so he has that money. And, of course, my team was mentioned, and I was like, that would be a decent game manager. We've got everything else in place. That would finally be that quarterback in place. But it would have to be but Dallas is retaining 15 to 20 million of that contract every year because nobody wants to pay $65 million for a quarterback that can't play in January.
Yeah, it's like this puts a lot of really large amount of pressure on your Pittsburgh Steelers because again, TJ Watt is not going to sit back or at least I don't think he's going to sit back and say, yeah, I'm comfortable allowing what has been my biggest comparison my entire career in what has been Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett, the first overall pick, same year TJ Watt drafted later in the first round pick or with a first round pick. I think he was pick 28. And those two guys have been lockstep their entire career because Myles Garrett wins Defensive Rookie of the Year. And then TJ Watt is the first guy to win Defensive Player of the Year out of those two. And it's been a constant comparison of the Steelers fan base versus the Brown fan base. Oh, well, Myles Garrett's better than TJ Watt. No, TJ Watt's better than Myles Garrett.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like the Steelers have 2 years to kind of figure this out. Nope. It needs to happen now, and there is zero chance in hell the Steelers are allowing TJ Watt to walk for nothing. And you can franchise tag him, but we all know the risk that the franchise tag comes with that. That's not a thing that players like. I still don't know why the franchise tag is even a thing in the NFL. I hate it so much. I'd rather just be a transitional tag of where you place it on a player and any team can sign them. Your team has 7 days to ultimately they get the option of whether they want to sign that deal. That is something the NFL has. I don't know why that isn't just the default tag that we have.
Yeah, I agree. What I will say about the franchise tag is now with deals like this happening, the franchise tag starts to make a little bit more sense. Because you look at that and you go, okay, well, a guy is going to want like 41 million, but if we franchise tag him, I believe the way they do it is it's a calculation
of top 5.
The average of the top 5 paid players. And so you look at that and you go, okay, well, if we franchise tag him, we're only going to have to pay him 34 million.
Totally.
Yeah. At that point, that's what you do with TJ Watt if that's what it comes to.
Yep.
He may not like it, but, and honestly, he has the opportunity to do a funny thing if the rest of the Steelers organization can get their shit together to the point where they actually could become a contender. He could go, well, no, I don't want the money like Myles Garrett took. I'm the better player. I want the championship.
Yep.
Is what he could do. Is he go, no, I'm not taking the money. I'm taking the championship. He wanted the money. So, yeah, he can have the money and rot in the basement in Cleveland. I'm going to go and lift the Lombardi trophy.
That has to be the hope for every Steelers fan right now. He looks at that and goes, $30 million a season is exactly all I need. It's really good money for me. It's top. It's not top dollar, but I'm basically giving you guys a discount. And he basically just comes out with the Josh Allen strategy. That has to be the god awful hope for all Steelers fans of just going like, please, TJ, don't be a dick.
Right.
Don't try to but at the same point, if you're TJ Watt and you're TJ Watt's agent, you go, why would we take less than the guy that we view that we're better than? And that's his right to do that. And I don't think anyone would, be upset if TJ Watt said, well, if Myles Garrett is worth $40 million a season, I'm worth
Yep.
42.
Yeah, no, I get that entirely too. But, as an organization that wants to win, I also would not fault Pittsburgh for going, I mean, if you want to be that way, fine.
Yep.
Franchise tag, and we're going to trade you to a team that's as good as the Cleveland Browns now and get some stuff back for you. So, enjoy your money and not winning a championship, just like Myles Garrett
Yeah.
is what it would become. It's like, okay, we'll trade you to the Panthers. Like, we'll get a couple of firsts back. Have fun. Bye.
Yeah.
It would
It's
suck. But if that's what it has to be, then that's what it has to be, unfortunately, because we've talked about it at length that a lot of these positions are starting to get way too overpriced to the point where the top stars are like, yeah, I'm going to be the top paid at this position or the position outside of quarterback. And it's like, yeah, and you're handcuffing your team to the point where you're never going to have a shot at a championship. And as a fan, that's what we want. Like, yeah, we love talented, good players. We love watching guys, like TJ Watt play, but not at the cost of not even having a shot at a championship. It's like if I'm going into the season knowing my team's going to go 3-14, and like we know that's going to happen because they can't fill any other roles adequately due to lack of cap, then I'm going to go, oh, well, I'm not going to bother taking a Monday off so I can watch them on Monday Night Football. Some plans came up on Sunday. Yeah, I'll skip football Sunday this week because fuck, my team's garbage anyway. Like that's what ends up happening. And I know I'm just one fan, so it doesn't affect the bottom line at all, but it slowly creates this, disconnect for a lot of fans for some of these fan bases. And the Pittsburgh Steelers have such a big fan base. I don't think they'd want to take that risk of having some of them disconnect because then all of a sudden you start to backslide and maybe you're not as great of a traveling team anymore. You start to lose that away advantage. And I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what ends up happening with TJ Watt and whether or not he opts to go for the big money and whether Pittsburgh gives it to him or goes, no, we're not the Cleveland Browns, man. Like, we don't do that. Like, do you not remember what we've done with every other player that wanted way more money than we thought they were worth? Every single other player, not a single one has ever held this team hostage for money. I don't think it starts with TJ Watt.
Yeah. It is this the Cleveland Browns need to be studied. Like that organization just needs to be put into like a bubble and just studied for like what is happening because of these sort of situations. It's a group of chaos that I think if you're not a Cleveland Browns fan, you kind of love to watch, but with some of those moves, you also kind of go like, God damn it, stop it.
Right?
Bad. I just want to hit you with a wooden spoon like our
Yeah.
grandma would. But it is a roller coaster. But that's all we have here today, guys. Thank you all very much for joining us here on the 1IQ Football Talk podcast. For Sterling, I'm Brendan saying peace.